Hello, welcome to Lady Overlander Radio. Tonight we're going to be talking about your public lands. Stay tuned. Grab your favorite drink, whether it's a coffee, cocktail, or tea, and get ready. It's Ladies' Night on Lady Overlander Radio. The Lady Overlander Radio podcast is sponsored by CB Adventure Supply, Midland Radio, Go Treads, Overland Spices, The Moore Expo, Wildland Coffee, Adventure Trail Outfitters, Lifesaver Water Filters, Sea Sucker Camp, and Sport Keg. Hey Arla, hey girl, hey.
Hey girl, hey. Happy Wednesday. That's all I got.
Happy Wednesday. We just got wrapped up Moore Expo last weekend. We got Bonfire coming up, Rendezvous Bonfire this weekend coming up. And then we have Expo West.
Professor Bats and Friends after that to go on their camp out.
Oh, yeah. The Professor Bats and Friends listener camp, and then Expo West. Yeah. That's just the beginning of the summer. And then we'll get to catch
all these people
with some of you guys on here, I'm sure, at Expo West. Yeah. All very busy this summer, I'm sure. We're going to take a minute here and introduce our roundtable panel. We have Rob. Go ahead and say a little bit about yourself, Rob.
Hey, I'm Rob Cook. I don't know, what should I say about myself? I always suck at kind of these introductions, but professionally speaking, I'm a software architect, but I'm kind of what I'm passionate about is getting out and camping and kind of all things overland and just getting out and enjoying our public land as much as I can.
Awesome. Thank you. Alexandra and Jacob.
Hi, I'm Alexandria. I am the founder of the Idaho Overland Association in Idaho Falls.
Yeah, now you get invited to these to keep her company. It's good stuff that she has going on. So it's all for the public land and keeping it open. So we're excited to be a part of it.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for being on. Tara?
I'm Tara. I think people watch, they've seen this intro a few times. I could make up something really fun, but I'll go with the boring. I am better known as Rove and Reverie online. I do marketing and media professionally in the industry, and then have also been doing commercial photography and videography for 17 years. So that kind of all ties into topic tonight.
Yes. And Christina.
Hi, so I'm Christina. Just like Tara, most people know me as Huntress Off-Road online more than they know me as Christina, but I work in marketing as well, and full-time for quite some time, a couple years at least, before settling down in the house we're in now. And I'm sitting here with Jonathan of Jonathan Harry Photography, who I think might have a couple of things to say later when it comes to the commercial photography and filming on public lands.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah, we're going to have some great topics tonight. So the first thing we're going to get started off with is the land closures and other issues that are affecting some of the public lands. And I think we'll start with Southern Utah. Who wants to take that one? I know that Christina has voiced her.
Wow. I would do it, but I was waiting for Rob to do it because he lives in St. George. So.
Yeah, I'm not as close to that topic as you probably think I am. I mean, I know about this kind of the Sand Mountain deal going down. I don't know if that's the one you were thinking of.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a land swap happening with BLM, which has a lot of people kind of upset. I do know about it, and I have voiced my concerns to BLM about that. But to say I'm an expert on that topic, definitely not.
Okay, well, I can jump in then.
Yeah.
I know.
Go ahead.
I'm a huge Trail Hero fan, so I've done Sand Hollow quite a few times. It's become kind of a hotbed for UTVs, for off-roaders in general, just because it's a really beautiful area. The Warner Valley is just absolutely stunning. It's got a lot of dispersed camping on it. It's a perfect area for dirt bikes, for OHV, for just off-roaders in general. I've taken the Jeep out there quite a few times. There's some really amazing trails all through the back part of Sand Hollow, which has incredible views. And unfortunately, they are talking about turning the area that's currently a big dispersed camping area, BLM public land dispersed campsites, into a reservoir. So they're planning on flooding that entire camping area, which is super sad. I've camped there many times between the Jeep and the motorhome, and just being out near Sand Hollow and camped in Warner Valley and everything. And so to lose that, I think, would be detrimental. And also, it's just like one of the kind of closest camping areas down there to like Zion Canyon and all of those really popular places that a lot of overlanders and off-roaders all like to use. It would also lose about, I think, a third of the trails in Sand Hollow Park area itself. So the West Rim Trail, which is super popular because it's like one of the more mild trails in Sand Hollow. So pretty much anybody who goes off-road can use it. And the views over Warner Valley from the West Rim Trail are amazing. You get to look at the Pine Valley Mountains, and it's just a habitat for desert tortoises and all sorts of stuff. Like there's just an amazing amount of like flora and fauna and everything that we would lose access to, and trail systems that we would lose access to if they were allowed to take over that entire property that they're wanting to trade.
Wow. And where does everything stand right now?
So there were hearings that happened, I want to say it was like 2 weeks ago now. I had encouraged a bunch of people to write to local politicians in the St. George area, in the Hurricane area and everything. I had encouraged them to write to people in BLM. I had encouraged them to write to the developer who has developed other areas in the past around Hurricane and St. George. It's been about a week since I've looked, so I'm not sure where things stand at this point, but that was where it was the last time I looked.
Okay. So I know that I think it was last year they passed in Utah where you have to, if you're going to be on a side-by-side or anything like that, not a normal regular four-wheel drive vehicle, but any other type of off-road platform, you have to go through training now. Is that correct? Has anybody heard about that?
Are you talking about,
or am I incorrect?
So there's the course that you've got to do, and it's any off-road vehicle, the one like most people did it before EJS. So that applied to all of us.
Okay.
There was one general that applied to all of us, even if you were in a Jeep. It's just any off-road use. And it's really simple. It took me maybe 15 minutes. I don't think it's a bad thing. I kind of like that they put that in place, even if people aren't really paying attention to what's in it. But it's really just all the basic tread lightly policies and procedures and explanation of making sure that somebody can answer the right question of this is what you do in this scenario on a trail. Quite frankly, I'm one of those people that think they should be charging for that, because then they have the money to put back into the other public land stuff that they're saying they don't have and all their reasons for the closures. But because Moab was going through the same thing of trail closure potential and things like that. So I'm one of those people that would happily pay a fee to have that, yearly little card or, whatever they make you go through to be on the trail if that contributed to keeping them open. But yeah, it's applied to everybody, not just the UTVs.
And is that something that people if we're traveling from Idaho to Utah, that we need to get as well?
Mm-hmm.
So that's
good. Like everybody going in for EJS did it. You do it online. It takes, like I said, like maybe 20 minutes.
Okay.
And it's really just like an awareness, like a basic principle thing.
Yeah, and it's one of those where like it won't let you go to the next answer until you get the answer right. So even if you get it wrong, like
kind of guaranteed to pass.
Well, that's good.
There's no failing it and taking it again. It just takes longer until you get it right.
I probably need that. Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that it goes over? Does it go over just what to do in a certain situation, or like as far as you're coming head on with someone, trail etiquette, things like that? Or
there was everything from basic trail etiquette to what do you do in this scenario if, as far as where you can be and how far off trail, et cetera, like, as far as even basic signage or understanding of what type of vehicle you're in where. Just kind of all the very basic stuff that's even on the Tread Lightly site that you can go through that most people don't read. But it makes you stop and read it because you have to read it to get to the next question. So I'm kind of a fan of it.
Yeah, I think I am too. That sounds like something that needs to happen because I see a lot of, especially in Moab, on Imogene Pass, on the different places that are very, very heavily trafficked. I see a lot of people doing things that they should not be doing. Yeah, big groups. So,
yep.
That's another thing that's been happening a lot lately is a lot of people are starting, later we're going to talk about the commercial filming and YouTube and all that, but a lot of people are starting these off-road expedition group companies and they're taking groups of people out, and I see people popping those up all the time.
20 vehicles or more.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a friend of ours tell us about, being camped at this spot in the middle of the night and 20 vehicles rolled up into their camp and literally came in and asked them if they would leave, and they had been there all day because they wanted that specific spot. They had planned on it, they wanted to get there. They never sent anybody ahead to take, hold the spot, but they wanted these people to pack up and move in the middle of the night so that they could come in and take that spot over. Just things like that, that kind of stuff irritates me. Really? And then I ask, I'm going to ask you guys, do you think that we abuse the public lands, overlanders and full-time RVers and things like that?
I think the majority of us, I would say, do not. There are certainly some people out there that do. And unfortunately, and I spent a lot of time in Utah in 2020 just because I was full-timing then. And it was during COVID. So Utah was really one of the only places that was very much open during 2020. And I ran into situations, especially in the national forest properties and things like that, where people would just park their campers there for months on end, like totally ignoring the time limits on how long you're supposed to be able to use lands for, what you're supposed to be able to use them for. Like, it's not a public garage. So it was kind of a bummer to see how many people were going out there just because it was pretty much all they had in 2020 and trashing public lands and treating it, like I said, like their public garage. And it was, there was a lot of abuse that happened. And I think it brought the issue to the forefront. And it's not so much those of us, like the people that are on this podcast that do those types of things, but people who maybe weren't as educated about public land use and weren't as accustomed to being out there as some of us have been.
Yeah.
I would definitely agree. We do at least one stewardship project a month around Idaho, and it is so disheartening with the things that we find and see. But I know there's also a great handful of people also, so I don't want to say we abuse the land. It's just a certain group that does.
Yeah, there's the rowdy bunches that will always do that. But everybody that we know and go out with always leave it better than we found it, and that's kind of the message that we try to carry and promote.
I think that's true. I mean, I think the circles that we all run in, I think it's a knowledge thing, right? So like if you go out, 1 or 2 times a year, yeah, you're going to leave your trash and you're going to burn whatever you can and leave pallets or whatever it is. But I think the more time you spend out there, the more you realize it's our resource. And I think at that point there is a shift where it becomes less of a, not even a liability, but less of a thing and more of your asset kind of mentality of like, oh, I can come out here anytime, well, I better take care of it kind of thing. And then especially when you see like the land grab and all that crap happening from the government side, you're like, oh, we actually really better take care of it. So.
Yeah, exactly. Don't somebody won't put a gate on it because they'll close it off. That's what we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, go ahead and elaborate a little bit more on what's going on in Idaho, guys. I've got a little bit of a technical issue. I'm going to drop off for just a second. But go ahead and tell the audience that's watching what's going on in Idaho right now.
Yeah, so about 2 months ago, we were contacted by Idaho Department of Parks and Rec, and they said, hey, guys, do you realize what BLM is trying to put in place? They're trying to put in place a travel management plan for our area, which ideally would be great. But this plan, in our opinion, consists of putting up gates. There's not an actual plan other than let's limit the trails. They look at a map and say, oh, this particular trail is parallel. It has a redundant trail. It's like, well, actually, if you go out there on that trail, that's a bypass because there's a major boulder that most people can't get around. So from BLM's perspective, they're not seeing that. And we're the ones who are actually on the ground at the trails. And not only does it affect the full-size vehicles, it's affecting equestrian, the bike riders, side-by-sides. It's everybody's trails in this particular area. What else?
Well, yeah, in our area, they've got a few different suggestions for their travel management plan, and it goes from closing nothing to closing almost everything, and then a few in between. So they're asking for public comment on what areas people want to see remain open and why. And I think most people would want to see all of it remain open. It's getting busier out there. There's more people that want to use it, and if we aren't using it responsibly, we're all going to lose it. And then the few that they leave left are going to be overcrowded because that's all that's left for everybody to flock to, and it just won't work. So we've got to figure out how to keep as many open as we can and educate people along the way to be responsible so they stay open.
I would also say one thing that you guys might be able to do to push back against that is, and Rob can tell you this and Christina can tell you this, I just came off a job mapping for the BLM. Down, we basically mapped everything from Yuma to the Gila Bend, and then Ajo down to the Mexican border and east, and they don't know what's out there. The BLM, if they're looking at a map that is 5 to even 3 years old, they have no idea what trails exist. They don't know. I mean, obviously they don't know that there's a boulder in the way, but they don't know what cutoffs are there, what trails have been reclaimed by nature because they're not being used. They have no idea. So I would urge them to send out a survey crew, and that'll take time because those dudes can only map 20, 30 miles a day, but they need to know what is on their land. And that's what the larger BLM properties are doing. BLM, like, that's not a small area. From Yuma, Arizona to the Gila Bend is, Rob, how far would you say that is? Like 200, 300 miles east?
Easy.
Yeah. So you're talking about, and if it's 25 by 200, you're talking about 40,000 square miles that they have no idea what trails are up in those mountains, what mines are there, what hazards are there, what trails have been reclaimed and no longer exist by nature. And that might be a little back pocket ammo for you guys to push back and go, hey, you don't actually know. This map is from 1999. These maps, so maybe that'll help. I don't know if that'll help you guys, but.
No, I think it would, because Idaho Parks and Rec, they were telling us they're more familiar with the single track trails, and they have those guys doing those trails constantly all day. Whereas the full-size trails, nobody's actually going out in these areas to map them, exactly what you said. So that's a good point.
Yep.
And it's just interesting because we are pretty close with Idaho Fish and Game as well, and they are on our side of this. So it's nice to have their support, and they're writing in their comments saying, hey, this actually doesn't affect us at all. Or if it does in one particular area, they say, let's make it a seasonal closure instead of a forever closure. So it's been nice working with them also to try to see what's best for the wildlife also.
Yeah, and I think that, all of the federal agencies that manage those lands have to balance, what's good for the public and what's good for the wildlife and all of that. But I get upset, I think, when there's closures and there's things that are not maintained. And then, they say, well, we're just not going to reopen that anymore. But it's something that has been neglected for a while, whether for funding or budgetary reasons or, whatever. And then they're either going to sell it off or trade somebody else for it or just close it down. And I know that that's been going on a lot in Arizona. I tried to get somebody from Arizona on, but I guess they were otherwise occupied. But, there's a very, very popular trail in Arizona that's still shut down, and people are petitioning to try to get it reopened. I think that there is a lack of, money available, I guess, that's what they the government agencies say. There's a lack of money and resources.
Which one are you talking about? I live in Arizona.
I think it's the one near, give me a second to think of the name of it. Tortilla Flat. There's a well-known trail near Tortilla Flat. I can't remember the name of the trail right now, but I've seen lots of petitions going around and lots of conversations about that over the past year or two. So
I never got a chance to do it because it was closed by the time I got to Arizona. So
yeah. And I know there's a lot of people that are pushing, to try to get that reopened again. But they say that it's just not worth it, I guess.
And if there was an actual plan, this area, we're actually going to go out once a year and see how the trails are, maintain them, and actually come up with an actual plan. I would be for that, but this isn't a plan, in my opinion, and that's what they're trying to call it. I don't see how just putting a gate on something and closing it is a plan.
That's what they did in Washington. So I'm from Washington, and when COVID hit, they basically just gated pretty much everything. We already have everything gated seasonally as it is because the second snow there, they just shut it down. So our window of time there is usually July through September if we're lucky anyways. But they gated it and then left things closed. And I would fire every year since then when I would go there, or I would even get tracked down on some trails that I didn't even realize were closed because people there got so tired of it that they took the gates down. And then, other people would end up there and you get in trouble. And I would ask, and the answer I get every time is we just do not have enough people or resources to cover maintaining or basically keep a track of activity and hunting activity and all of that kind of stuff out there. So that's always just the answer I get, was that it was just not worth it for them, or they did not have the resources to reopen things. So there are places that used to be my regular spots that I would even take my kids when they were little that have been gated and stayed gated. And I think there's a lack of people pushing back to, because they're very rural areas for the most part. So there's not maybe enough organized pushback on it, that they just kind of get left that way, and then they count on people forgetting.
I believe that. I mean, the BLM is an incredibly understaffed government agency, but I think that outlines the importance of people like us kind of stepping in to, if this is something we want to maintain, if we want to maintain access to all these places, then we need to take over stewardship of it as best we can, and not just use the land responsibly ourselves, but also to promote it.
Absolutely. Or maybe even go ahead.
I said Tara brought up a good point with you would go out and trails technically closed, but the gate has been removed. People are going to go out there anyway if they're just going to do it.
It's also interesting to note. I don't know I can't speak to other apps, but Onyx is actually adapting to this, where you can actually, if you're out on a trail and a gate's closed, you can update the trail status.
Yeah,
is nice. Direct response to these gates going up and trails being closed, and it's more than just this is snowed in kind of thing.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I was doing a trail in Arizona, and we it turned from one trail into another, and it was 100 and something miles, and we got almost to the end, and that's when it was gated off.
It always is.
That sounds
right when you need to make the turn, there's boulders and a gate.
I'm gonna have to be bad this time because it was literally almost to the end. If there was another sign saying it was closed somewhere else, we completely missed it.
Right.
It didn't look closed on Gaia. No. So we got almost to the end, and we had to go around the gate just to get back on the highway. So
we encountered that 2 days ago going out on a camping trip, and they dropped the route, and I was like, hey, I was out there mapping 2 days ago. There's a gate there. And they're like, really? Are you sure? And I was like, I'm pretty sure.
Just have it.
Trust me when I tell you.
Well, in Arizona, it's pretty difficult out here.
Last summer, where coming down at the very end of a trail, boulders and logs, and I have a Jeep. There was no sign. So, I just went over it.
Yes.
There was no sign. There was nothing. And I remember coming back down and running into a park ranger coming out there. And he's like, that was closed. He's like, did you not see the boulders? I'm like,
I thought it was just for fun. Yeah.
I thought they were put there just for me.
An obstacle.
Sorry, like put a bigger.
You're not moving your traction.
I thought you made a terrain park. That's so weird.
Yeah. Sometimes
another thing that I was coming across where like you would find these obviously like bouldered or logs down in Washington, they always just put logs across them. Again, you can go over it, but there's no sign. So there was a lack of signage, whether that be from people removing it or them just assuming people just would not cross the boulders or the logs. But I've never met Jeep people. Like, this is not a problem. So that was the other thing, is a total lack of signage everywhere I was.
Yeah.
So what is the legality with that? I mean, so, you know, if they put boulders and logs across something and there's no sign, I mean, is there legal footing?
I pushed that to the time that I got stopped because, again, there's no sign. And if I can prove there was no sign, they kind of lose their ability to say or do anything, because obviously I was not intentionally maliciously somewhere that was signed or marked or actually gated off. And then you're also on that side of it is still technically public land that is technically marked. Like, there's too many gray areas with it right now. And I think that's part of their frustration, is their lack of ability to enforce things, and then people that figure out that there's a lack of ability to enforce things because it's a big gray area. That I think that may also have played into the lack of signage in the spots that the more remote areas of, like, technically, are they allowed to technically close that in that way? If there's kind of, I never got a straight answer. I just kind of got the whole, well, we said, and, you know, we marked it off because we don't have the people to maintain it, but there was no answer on, like, what happens if somebody violates.
That brings up such a good point. And like his conversation about Onyx a second ago. So I'm, aside from being an off-roader, I'm also a hunter. And so I have both Onyx off-road and Onyx hunt. And one of the interesting things, I think they're calling it like the Onyx like anomaly or something like that, or like the Onyx dilemma or whatever. But like Onyx brought something to light, which is the fact that public land in the West is often interspersed with private land. And it's almost like looking at a checkerboard where you think that you're on public land, but then for a second you're on private land, and then you're back on public land. And then for a second you're on private land, and you're crossing these boundaries all the time in different areas all over the West. And one of the places that I hunt pretty much annually is up in Montana. And there's a massive lawsuit happening in Montana right now over the same type of thing, where a man tried to stay on public land by literally crossing
the corner. I heard about that.
Corner of two, like the junction of two boxes on the grid of public land, and
he brought a ladder.
Literally,
there was a picture of checkerboard, right? So like, here's one and here's the other. So they're and he brought a ladder.
Yeah. So that he literally was like in the airspace, like not even touching the ground. He was in the airspace from one piece of public land to the other. And he's being sued for literally millions of dollars by the private landowner because he technically trespassed on private land to get to this checkerboard block of public land and shot an elk. And this guy runs like a private game preserve on his private ranch in Montana. So he was like, well, I lost millions of dollars in revenue potentially by losing that one bull elk that you shot. So, and it just like, it brings up such a good point, not necessarily just for hunters, but in OHRVers too, because I myself actually got stopped on a road in Montana that I assumed was a public forest road because it went to a public forest property that I hoped to hunt on. And sure enough, like it crisscrossed through private land like 2 or 3 times on my way out there. And the rancher came flying up on a UTV and was like, hey, you need to get the hell out of here. And I was just so surprised by it. But here I am, like relying on the best versions of a map that I have, you know what I mean, to get me from point A to point B. And I happened to be using Onyx Off-Road at the time and not Onyx Hunt that showed me where the property boundaries were for private and public land. So it was just, it was an interesting situation that I found myself in. But it's become a problem for so many more people, not just me. It's now that Onyx is like so popular and you actually get those property grid maps now, it's become a problem all across the West.
The property grid maps are a major thing for me. And I've known that just because of filming and doing commercial work for so long, of not the average human being does not even know or think to go look that up. But for me, if I'm filming, I know that I have to find those boundaries to be able to find those. So like there's the one, that secret geothermal cave that I found in Wyoming, you are on private land, ranch land, for 95% of the way out there, which they can take away your ability to cross that at any time. So like it's one of those where you play very, very nice and you still get approached by people out there, and like it's made very clear that you are on private land. But it crisscrosses in spots, and I'm one of those people that's very careful to get permission if I know I'm going to be filming somewhere or taking photos, just because that is private property and that is the rule. But to be able to go look that up, to get the information of who owns that property, or even the most recent information, sometimes that is 10 years old, even when you go look it up online and look for the property records. So having that information be made updated and more available is a huge helpful thing, but it's still very hard to find the information on, especially in the basic map programs. They don't even show you the basics of that most of the time.
I will say there's a tricky area that I always stick to fence lines. If there's a road next to a fence line and you stick on that, there is a natural easement. I believe that's the law across the West, but I'm probably wrong. But it's one of those, like, well, we were driving. Well, I mean, how many ranches have roads right along the fence line that this goes to Joe's and then Pete's and then the Smiths, you know, and it's like, okay, well, can the Smiths not go home because Joe and Pete own the road? Like, what's the deal? So,
if they want to.
I just stay on the fence line as long as I can. But also, I will say, like, if it's a forest road, if it has a forest road number or a road designation, then that's government property. If it's designated FR 304 and then it changes to Smith Valley Road for 2 miles and then it goes back to 304, no, the forest road put that in, the forest department, whoever, that is a government road. And I'm not trying to be combative, but that's just kind of like a safe zone. And of course, I'll beg forgiveness for anything. But like, you know, as far as just getting places, you can't. I mean, I don't know how people can just close a road for, like, look at that. How can you close a road for one grid? Like, what even
yeah.
Well, the spots that I was heading to are not actually. They are very like top secret, not on a map locations that were part of private ranch that then BLM asked to take over that little, because what they discovered on the property, they asked somehow to get permission just for that, like within like literally 100 feet around it. And then everything else is still that massive ranch. Because when you're Wyoming, Montana, like the size of these ranches, it's hard to give people an understanding of the size of these proproperties and the ranches that you're on. You could be on
tens of thousands of acres.
Yes. So you could be on it all day and still be on the same ranch. So because of trying to keep people out, they do keep this, at least they're very good there about keeping the signage up of like, this is a private road. You are only allowed with the, you know, in this zone. And if you cross that, like, fair game, it's Wyoming.
Yeah. Like, that was a great illustration. Whoever pulled that up, I'm not sure. I don't know which one.
That was me.
Ari or Misty. Okay, yeah, that was a great illustration.
To show
exactly what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Though,
the checkerboard stuff.
Yeah, and sometimes it looks like it's a public easement. Like he said, like a forest road's pretty typical. I just was looking at a dirt road on a map and hoping that it was, and I got chased right back off. So.
I will say recently, like, I've mapped everything between our ranch and the Grand Canyon through that forest, and I've, like I said, mapping the last 3 months down in remote desert, like middle of nowhere. And if that thing is closed, there is a sign up. They have someone who's been out there, whether it's on a 4-wheeler or UTV. So if there's no signs, I don't think they have. Personally, I don't have anything for them, because with all the remote places that we've been, I have seen signs where it says trail closed, reforestation project, or wildlife management project, or water commission. I'm happy to get out of there. But if you can't just throw a log across something and be like, hey, we're done for the night.
No, and we're noticing, at least in Idaho, a good portion of our lands are half BLM, half Forest Service. So say the BLM opens 1st of April. Well, the other half of the trail doesn't open until May 15th. So go all the way through, and then all of a sudden you're breaking the law again. And there's no consistency in our area. And it's kind of frustrating when we're trying to figure out where we can go or where we shouldn't go.
Washington
Absolutely.
has that too. And then they also have the tribal land mixed into it. If you're out near the coast, that becomes an even bigger complication. And then it's a totally different set of rules that you have to.
I barely mess with that. So.
That's a whole other episode.
We don't drive the lands after dark.
No, like that's like a whole other thing. I've only camped on the reservation one time and pulled trespass permits one time for that. And it was such a stressful experience, honestly. For
Washington is the opposite. For me, the tribal land in Washington was like, if you ask permission and if you treat them respectfully, I was always the best, safest. Like, they just ask that you are respectful and ask permission the way you're supposed to. And if you do that, I've never had a problem there. But again, like, once you're on that land, you only answer to them and nobody else.
I was told, like, this chick hates you, like, don't talk to this person. If you get caught, like, camping down here by anybody who's, like, a native from the reservation, like, they're going to be so mad that they even see you down here. And I'm like, oh my God, why am I paying for this? Like, I'm so, okay, like, maybe, do I really want to do this? Like, at this time, I was, like, a solo traveling female. So it was not a situation I was 100% certain I wanted to get myself into. But the campsite ended up being amazing. So I'm glad I did. But, yeah, it's just a lot. So
yeah,
so it's a lot to worry about. But yeah.
Well, I think speaking of
another situation in Arizona, though, which is on your topic, Alexander and Jacob. There's a few trails in Arizona where on one side you have national forest property, but on the other side, it's actually like national park property. So if you're talking about filming or photography or something like that, you can literally take photos on one side of the trail, like one lane of the trail, and not in the other. Like there's a whole stretch where like you can fly your drone as long as it's on the passenger side of your vehicle, but not on the driver's side of your vehicle. And like, it gets really interesting when you start paying attention to all those little intricate things like that.
Well, that's a good segue for me. We're going to move into the filming discussion on public lands. And really quickly, I'm going to show a recent YouTube video that Rob sent me that shows, you know, some of these other companies' concerns about the public lands and filming.
Mm-hmm.
Company founded on the belief that when we do well, we can do good. We actively advocate for policies that expand recreational opportunities and support organizations whose missions bring more people outside. The outdoors, and more specifically our federal lands and waters, are for all Americans, and we believe that more people and kids should experience the wonders of being in the wild. This mindset drives our business actions. We've invested more than $1 billion acquiring new outdoor companies. The Vista Outdoor Foundation has funded over a dozen organizations focused on conservation and expanding youth access to the outdoors. We are one of the largest contributors to conservation through the Pittman-Robertson Act, with more than $500 million since our founding. Much of our business success, combined with bipartisan outdoor policy wins led by this subcommittee, has contributed to the growth of the outdoor recreation economy. The latest Bureau of Economic Analysis research shows that the outdoor recreation economy represents $862 billion in gross output, 4.5 million jobs, and 1.9% of GDP. From 2020 to 2021, the outdoor recreation economy grew 3 times faster than the overall U.S. economy as Americans flocked outdoors during the pandemic. This translates to job creation, economic development, diversification for our rural communities in and around federal lands and waters. Despite outdoor recreation's run of successes, the industry is not immune to the larger macroeconomic conditions. Rampant inflation and rising interest rates are harming consumers who must make the choice to buy groceries or plan an adventure. Long-term trends provided by the Outdoor Foundation show declines in core participation in outdoor outings. National park visitation shows that even during the post-pandemic boom, overall visitation to our parks remains below 2019 levels and off of 2016 highs. and outdoor recreation companies have been harmed by federal trade policies, including the lapse of the generalized system of preferences and inconsistent 301 tariff policy. The current climate and long-term outlook make today's bipartisan hearing essential, and we urge the subcommittee to move with speed and conviction to enact these bills. More specifically, we support the Film Act. We need to recruit and activate the next generation of outdoor recreation champions, and the Film Act will help us reach and inspire these future leaders and those champions that we need. We support the SOAR Act. This legislation fundamentally improves the way people access and experience the outdoors, and we thank the partisan leaders who have gotten us to this point. We support the BOLT Act. Long-distance bike trails are one of the fastest growing segments of gravel riding, and this bill will attract more users to our federal lands. We support the Range Access Act. Recreation.
Okay, so Rob, why don't we start talking about the Film Act? What's that about?
Sure. So I don't know if you want to talk much about the background of it or not, but kind of
absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's give everybody a brief little overview of what's going on.
Well, I first found out about this topic probably back in 2021 when I heard, that there was filming that was, that the National Park Service basically updated their guidance and was now allowing filming without a permit. But in 2022, that guidance was updated to where they were kind of taking a hard line against YouTube and those sorts of things. And that kind of ended up being some legislation that's making its way through Congress called the Film Act. It's kind of the high level of that. There's a lot of detail in there, but that's the high level of it. Tara, I was kind of curious. I mean, you said you do a lot of, commercial filming or filming. In what kind of your experience has been with permitting? And
it's been for 17 years, it's changed a lot depending. And a lot of it is primarily the biggest issue I've always run into has either been national park or county. So like those are the most usually controlled or even within some city limits now. And it always comes down to their issue being what they define as commercial use versus personal use. And social media and social media marketing has changed in the last 3 years rapidly to what is defined as commercial or somebody making money off of it. Because the reality is I hear a lot of people, especially with overlanders and things like that are creating content saying, no, this is personal, this isn't commercial. But that's not the case. The second you are making any type of income or getting something in return for it, it does take on a commercial bent. Like any different, like, so with when I was doing wedding or personal photography years ago, there was a side to it that if it was for a client and they were the only ones using that personally, there was not a commercial factor involved because that was private. There was no, it was not going into a commercial. It was not being advertised. It was not being used in advertisements. It was only ever seen or used by the clients that I was filming for. But the overland side of things, like, this is unpopular opinion on my end, I think, from what I get back from people, is that they don't like that it's considered commercial, but it is. I think that what needs to change is how, whether they do it nationwide or statewide, because that's the bigger problem, is every state, every national park, every county, every city can have their own rules, and they can add permit on top of permit. Is that it needs to be one way across the board, whether that be by state or whatever, or by national parks, so that it becomes a more affordable permit, because the violation of that can be financially devastating if you get a fine for it. Or their fees for it sometimes can range in the ridiculous, like $10,000 to $15,000 permit range, if you can get one, if you can get a hold of them to get one, for something that you're not even making a fraction of that for. So they need a different system that has just not been up to date with what is going on industry-wise and marketing-wise.
I've been kind of personally, immersed in this on the federal level for the last 6 months, just trying to learn about it. And but yeah, I've been wondering, like, at the state level, like, I'm sure there's all sorts of different laws, and like you said, the county level, and
the problem
it's just
is that, like,
just the
every state park has their own rules. So every time I am in that location, I have to go look up that, and it changes by the year too. So you need to know what's current, because I could have looked up a spot 2 years ago and they've got different rules now. So if it's a national park, generally they're all pretty much the same, but you still have to go on their site or find their person that you can call and ask permission or figure out what the rules are, especially when it comes to drones. For the most part, I play that real safe and don't even bother to put that up if there's even a chance that it's an issue. And that's more a safety factor that people don't even realize, that they limit the drones so much because it becomes a safety factor. If there are drones up and they need to fly in emergency personnel and things like that, they can't if you're drone. Like, it's a major safety issue for them. So that side of it, I understand. And the heavy fines on that kind of stuff, I completely agree with, because if you're creating a situation that you could prevent either fire service teams or search and rescue people from doing their job, yeah, fine them until they cannot, or you get banned from the park is the other rule for that one. But the state parks are also allowed to make their own rules, and then the counties and cities are as well. So they can all have their own little permit or fine for those areas. There's nothing cohesive across the board that you don't have to go check every single park that you're in and the land that you're on before you go. So to me, that's the system that needs major overhauling, and for them to decide monetarily what they're charging that is actually affordable for what people can do with it. Like, where it's at right now for most of them is just not a feasible amount of money for somebody to do.
I can only kind of speak to the federal side of things, but my kind of research and reaching out and inquiring about getting permits, at a minimum, a lot of these places wanted, $500, $600, $700 in permitting fees. And then there was insurance requirements that, you had to get liability insurance that was, $300,000 of coverage up to $5 million of coverage.
Okay. So that one, I think if anybody is out there doing what I'm doing, which is the overlanding, filming yourself, doing all of that, you should have anyways. I'm sorry, but my policy is $280 a year for $2 million in coverage of liability insurance on myself. That's just, I do agree with that one. That is an affordable thing, that if you have the vehicle that you're driving out there and you're paying the vehicle insurance on it, you can put liability insurance on yourself.
Right. Well, and in this case, they want you to name the U.S. government as one of the insured. Yes. And their reasoning behind that is because it's really about resource protection.
Yes.
So if you go out there and damage resources, they want to make sure that you have the means to pay for the repairs, that may happen.
And so for that one, because obviously, like, for 17 years of commercial work, anytime I go somewhere and work, I have to put that venue or that place on the policy. It takes 2 seconds to do. You just email it in. That's not a problem. And keeping it general U.S. government on there does solve a problem that, like, what their claim is that they're shutting things down or limiting use on things because of that being an issue. That solves some of their resource issue, or making sure that things are taken care of properly issue. Might make insurance rates go up a tiny bit, but still, it's not that much.
But that's also the line between a professional and a YouTuber. Like, I mean, Tara, I'm sure you encounter this too. When someone says, I'm a photographer, you kind of roll your eyes internally and go, okay, cool. Because I do that all the time, and I'm really trying to break that habit. But, like,
okay, well, to me, then we're using the same. Right, but to me, I would be using the same standards that they use for our taxes. If you make a certain amount or under, you're considered a hobbyist. If you're making over and that is on your taxes, then you are a professional. To me, that's an easy guideline for them to put in place.
That's fair. I'm agreeing with you. All I'm saying is, if it's a commercial shoot, like, let's say you get picked up by Nike and they want you to shoot a running shot of 4 girls running down the trail in the Grand Canyon. You have a producer, you have a casting director, you have 4 assistants, a PA, you have a motorhome on the rim, you have all that, and that producer has the insurance along with your insurance. You have $5 million in coverage. That's the difference between, I showed up with my friends and shot this really cute shot, and we sold it to a sock company.
But that kind of goes back. That kind of goes back to your point about how they're like, there needs to be some sort of sliding scale, right? Like, if you're using it, there needs to be like consistency, and there needs to be a sliding scale, right? If you're using it for your YouTube channel, okay, fine. Like, there's a fee that's a certain level. If you're using it for a Nike shoot where you've got 5 people and trailers and models and all this other stuff, then okay, Nike can afford to cough up some money for our public lands.
Yes. And there are countries that have figured this out, by the way. I'm trying to think off the top of my head which ones. I believe New Zealand has a pretty good system in place. But there are countries and places that have figured this out as far as making the smaller fees for the people who are doing it as hobbyists or social media, whatever, influencers. There's actual influencer fees. Where was I? God, I posted it. Christina, I think you commented on it at one point where I was somewhere and it popped up that there was an influencer fee.
Yeah.
I can't remember where it was.
Valley? I don't remember.
It's probably Death Valley or Anzaburg.
Yeah, I think
It was California.
Well-
It was definitely California, somewhere in California. But they had
I think it was Death Valley
for influencer, and to me, I'm like, hell yes, we'll pay that. It was like $15 or something. I'm like, happy to, if that makes sure that things are being run properly and all of that. But there are some places that
you're not an influencer.
I'm pretty sure they
I wanted
actually
to
called
read
it-
something real quick, guys. This is from the National Park Service. It says federal law requires a permit for all commercial filming, no matter the size of the crew or the type of equipment. This includes individuals or small groups that don't use much equipment, but generate revenue by posting footage on websites such as YouTube and TikTok. So
here's the problem with that. Here's the problem with that, and there's three problems, I believe. Is what's the definition of commercial? Because
I can answer that.
I've shot everything from cars to country music. I've shot for People magazine and Forbes magazine, and they have specifically said this is advertorial.
Yes.
It's not advertising and it's not editorial. So what is it? So there's no definition for commercial.
Yep.
So that
iPhone messed up all that when they started putting out billboards saying shot by iPhone. So all these lines are now blurred. There's no true definition, and now you just have the parks going, there's an opportunity for $200,000.
Yep.
Well, that guidance that you just read, if you go to the National Park Service and you ask them what the federal code is behind that guidance, they're going to point you to, and I'm just looking at my screen to make sure I get it right. It's Title 43, Subtitle A, Part 5. And that is actually covering everything within the Department of Interior. So it's not just National Park, it's BLM, and it's also Fish and Wildlife. National Forest is under the Department of Agriculture, and they have very similar language. But in that federal regulation, they define commercial. And I can read it to you. Let me go down here and find it. It says it means the film, electronic, magnetic, digital, or other recording of a moving image by a person, business, or other entity for a market audience with the intent of generating income. And that's kind of the very vague language that they're using to, in some cases, apply to social media now, right? Because this legislation that this is based on was back to the year 2000, right? I mean, really before people were like, you could go out with your iPhone and make money with it. And so this definition didn't really have that in mind, right? I think they're clearly targeting movie studios, but I can understand by the letter of the law, if the intent is generating income, how you can kind of arrive at this idea that, well, if I monetize a video on YouTube
so here's
or
the problem.
TikTok or...
Here's the problem, Rob. We were camping together, a month ago?
Yeah.
You had time lapses going, right? Like
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So let's say I wake up before you wake up, and I shoot you setting up your camera to shoot a time lapse, and I've got your rig, and it's all photographed beautifully, and you're running around, and I do that, and I post it on my Instagram. I'm not intending to make money.
Right.
I mean, you have a 4-wheel, correct?
You broke up a little bit there. I didn't hear what you said, Jonathan.
You have a 4-wheel camper, correct?
I do. Yes.
That's public knowledge, right? So
yeah.
Let's say I put it on my Instagram without the intent of making money, and 4-wheel camper hits me up and is like, "Hey, that's a beautiful shot of our camper. Can we license that from you for $1,000 for the next 6 months?" And I say, "Well, I was just messing around, but sure."
Yeah.
Am I now liable because my intent wasn't to create?
Right. Well, I think that's where this topic gets really, really interesting, right? Yeah.
And who decides?
Yeah.
And if we know anything about the government, the burden of proof is now all on me to prove.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
Wasn't trying to make money. It's just my buddy Rob, and he's cool.
And I probably should have mentioned this up front, but I recently wrote an article for Expedition Portal that was published kind of on this topic, and it was kind of 6 months of research that I did and just kind of sharing what I learned. And at the end of that, basically it depends on who you ask. I mean, I talked to people at National Park, at BLM, Fish and Wildlife, National Forest, and I got several different answers depending on who I was talking to. And one thing that they all had in common was, when I kind of pushed them on the social media topic, was that if I was making money from it, so if I monetized my video, that was commercial. And that was kind of true across all of them that I spoke to. Now, whether or not they were required to get a permit, depends again on who you ask to. Some of them, you know, they're like, yeah, it's fine. You're just a guy with a camera. Even if it's commercial, we're going to allow you to film without a permit. But not all of them. Some of them want to push you through the same process, you know, that the movie studios go through, right? I mean, they're giving me this form to fill out, and they're like, you know, one of the questions is, you know, any stunts? And I'm asking myself, I'm like, well, I'm going to drive over some rocks. I don't know. Is that a stunt?
That's a
like,
stunt.
what is that?
Tara does that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did.
Let's just say the answer to that is always yes.
Yes.
The reason I carry
So-
liability insurance on myself,
Absolutely.
okay?
Which probably makes my insurance go up, right? So,
I think my mother
you know,
carries
but
insurance on me.
but you know, I had other discussions with other permitting folks from different agencies that, you know, they were really strict on this topic. And, you know, when I pushed back and said, okay, well, I'm just going to take something and post it on YouTube and I'm not monetizing it, you know, do I need to get a permit? And they're saying, yes, that's commercial. And I said, but I'm not making money. And they're saying it doesn't matter. If you go back to this language, the intent of generating income, it's not my intent, but it's the intent of the social media platforms that are allowing me to do it.
Shouldn't they have to pay the fee?
Well, that's what I kind of wonder. I mean, why is anybody going after YouTube or Instagram or any of these other companies?
Those dudes' checks are always going to clear.
Yeah.
Probably because you're not a contracted employee for them. So
Correct. That's what it comes down to, because you would have to be an employee for them, which is never going to be the case. Like, there's so many, like, I've gone over this so many times because it's been such a pain in my ass for 17 years that there are so many ways for them to address this or handle it and get the money they're looking for out of it more consistently, right down to, we all have our national park pass for the year, right? Why couldn't they do an edition of it that is for influence or social media people that they charge more, and it is just known that you are creating content and you can follow those same rules where you have to, you know, you'll get banned if you violate this and this rule.
That's a great idea.
Really do the things.
Here's my other question is, I know when you, like, Instagram, and I don't know about, I can't speak to Facebook or YouTube, but I'm just going to speak about Instagram. Instagram has, in their terms of her service, any photo you put on there, Instagram now owns.
Mm-hmm.
So why couldn't I be, if I'm filming and I get fined, why couldn't I then be, if I'm creating for Instagram, why couldn't I be considered?
So that's a good question, Jonathan. And I actually I didn't look at Instagram specifically, but I looked pretty close at YouTube in their terms of service. And very clearly in their terms of service, they assume that you have the rights to post what you're posting. So, you know, I would think in a legal situation, if you were like, well, I see Adventures and Sweet Tea here, you know, they brought up a very good point. YouTube shows ads on non-monetized videos, right? So, you know, if someone went to YouTube, if somebody came after me and I said, well, I didn't monetize it, YouTube monetized it, go after them, you know, YouTube would come back and say, well, did you have the rights to post that? Like, this is not our problem. We said in our terms very clearly that you need to own the rights to post that. So if this was commercial in nature and you didn't get a permit, how did you don't have the right?
Everybody passes up to the little guy.
Right. So, you know, maybe this is a good point to kind of talk about. So there is legislation that's in the works in Congress right now around this, and there's Senator Barrasso out of Wyoming back in 2021 introduced something called the Film Act, and its intent is basically to kind of set the rules for allowing commercial filming, no matter the media it's delivered on, including social media, in certain cases, so that you don't have to go through this permitting process. That never made it out of committee. It's been in committee since 2021, in 2022, and now in 2023, they rolled the Film Act into something called Aurora, which is one of these big omnibus bills that has a bunch of different legislation in it. But one of the things that was included was the Film Act. And, you know, as part of the negotiations of getting the Film Act into that bill, they modified it a little bit. But, you know, again, this is just proposed legislation. But if this legislation makes it into law, you know, what the rules that they're outlining are basically, if you are 5 people or less, and you are doing the things that are, you know, within the boundaries of what any normal visitor to any of these public lands would do. You're not doing something out of the ordinary, right? I'm not out there like building ramps and jumping my vehicle or something, right? Something that's allowed by any visitor, and you're filming, you know, that would be allowed without a permit. But, you know, and then they have additional language in there where it's 6 to 8 people into something called a de minimis permit, which is where you would have to get a permit, but it's supposed to be a very easy and inexpensive process to go through, and something that hopefully be readily available. Like maybe I can just go on a website and say I need a permit for 6 people, and they issue it and I pay $10 or whatever it is. Where I think that makes things better than they are today. It doesn't really completely fix the issue for a couple of reasons. One is it doesn't do anything with the Wilderness Act. So anything that's deemed a wilderness area is still going to be under the same rules as under today, and there's a lot of commercial restrictions around that. Mm-hmm. And it's got very vague language in it. So when they talk about this 5 people, they have this word involves. So it says if your filming involves 5 people or fewer. And I have several contacts at the ENR committee that I've been kind of talking to over the months as this has been playing out. And I actually didn't sit down, but I had a call with and talked to the attorneys who helped draft this language. And I asked them what involved means, and they couldn't tell me. And I said, well, how is that supposed to be interpreted? And they said, well, if this ever goes to court, if this becomes law and there's a court case, they'll refer back to the committee notes and to help them kind of decide what the word involved means. And I said, well, can I see those notes? And the answer was crickets.
So you basically say if it's the difference between a film crew or like you and Avis, me and Jonathan, Tara, and Alex and Jacob all go camping.
What does it mean? Yeah,
I mean, YouTube video happens to include all of us in a campsite. Like,
yeah, I mean, a very real scenario is we go out, camping and, with 10 or 15 people, and, maybe I get my camera out and I start filming, right? Well, I'm the only person filming, so am I the only person involved? Or, is everybody that shows up on my film involved? Well, I don't know the answer to that, and they don't seem to know the answer to that.
Sue you to get you out of your legal fine.
Right. So, while I say if this becomes law, I think it makes things better, it's still not really perfect because it's kind of vague. And so, what I was hoping would happen was that we would get a lot more awareness that this is actually moving through Congress, and that it would kind of motivate people to contact the committee and say, hey, before you guys vote this out of committee, potentially, queuing it up to become law, why don't we try to fix this language? Let's make it clear what the word involves means, so that 2 years from now, we're not, someone doesn't get dinged, or fined or arrested or whatever because they had 6 people involved and they didn't even know what involved meant.
I'd say that's a good point, because when we have all the kids with us, there's 5 kids, so we're already in trouble.
Well,
well, maybe you don't know what involved means. Is it just you because you're the only one holding a camera?
Have you figured out who you're going to leave behind?
Yeah,
somebody's like staying home and
don't leave anybody.
It's me. I'm staying behind.
Smart.
Smart. No, I mean these are really good points. And what constitutes, let's say I go out with my husband and 3 kids, and while we're out, I'm filming video footage and taking pictures, and I post some of them on Instagram, Facebook, and then I put some of the video on YouTube. I do a YouTube short, and my channel right now that I have is not monetized. But do I technically need a permit? Yeah. I would say, to be on the safe side, yeah, because you could go from one park to another forest to something else on the same journey, and maybe somebody requires it and maybe somebody doesn't. But then, that brings up another question. If I'm going through 3 different federal lands, BLM, national forest, and then a national park, do I get 3 different permits from 3 different entities?
Yeah.
How does all of that work out for all these YouTubers and all these influencers? And
yeah, so BLM is kind of a really interesting topic on this. So I when I was kind of doing my research and trying to figure this whole topic out, I had reached out to a field officer at BLM, and they told me they sent me through the filming permit process. As a matter of fact, they sent me to a Hollywood, like a consultant that does movie permitting for Hollywood studios. And they were like, yeah, go get a permitting, and these are the best, people to help you through it. So I was kind of like, this doesn't make any sense, but I'm going to have fun with this. So I reached out to this consulting firm that does permitting for big Hollywood productions. And I said, hey, BLM told me to contact you. I'm going to show up out on this, the BLM land with my my GoPro, and they said, you need to help me get a permit. And they laughed. You know, they were like, yeah, like this isn't what we do. But you know, if you talk to a different BLM office, you might get a different answer, right? Like, you know, here in Utah, you know, in particular, I've had a lot of discussion here in Utah because we live here and talk with their, you know, state leadership, and you know, they're taking a more lax approach to it than some of these other areas where they, you know, they are like, yeah, I mean, if you're just a guy out there with a camera, we kind of consider that casual commercial filming, and we're fine with that. But if you call a different field office, you might get a different answer. So I spent, you know, 3 months talking to different, you know, folks at BLM from the national level to the state level, and just trying to sort this issue out. And then, you know, and they knew that I was writing this article for Expedition Portal. And I asked them, I'm like, I still don't know what to say about BLM. I don't really understand. And, you know, kind of what they came back to me with was, what you should say is, before you film on BLM land, you should reach out to the field office each time before you film and inquire if you need a permit. And if they tell you that you don't need a permit, you should get that in writing from them to protect yourself. And that was basically their official answer. So
that's a really good point. I was doing a shoot it was just a content shoot for social media for Rogue Ales and Spirits during an off-road trip. And we were out in Glen Canyon NRA. So that's the BLM field office in Big Water, if I remember correctly. So I called them to ask if I needed a permit and I was just doing, it's literally like one camera and a couple of cell phones. And we were just getting some video for stories and reels and stuff like that for their social. And we were getting some photography for their social. And when I called them, they literally laughed at me. So
yeah.
They were like, yeah, no, you're good. It's fine. Like, just leave us alone.
And the craziness is, you call a different office and they're like, yeah, you're going to have to get a permit and you're going to have to fill out this form. And, you know, how many people are going to fill in your, I'm like, I don't know. It's my wife and I and a few friends. And I'm like, okay, well, those are actors in your film, and here's the fee that goes with those. And, you know, all of a sudden, go ahead.
Is there anything we can do at a state level to write to somebody saying, hey, we need to try to standardize this, like, for different BLM offices? Is there something we can do?
Well, that's what the federal legislation is trying to do. So what I would say is, you know, again, this is kind of the messy part of the federal government and these omnibus bills, right? I mean, they have this Aurora Act, and I don't pretend to know everything in this bill. As a matter of fact, the Film Act is part 401 of this bill, which will tell you how big this bill is. And I know there's some stuff in that bill that is not necessarily favorable, that, you know, a lot of people don't like. But, you know, just if you're strictly just kind of singly focused, you know, that getting into law will make things better than they are today. And at least on federal lands, it doesn't do anything with state land. It doesn't do anything with, you know, wilderness areas, but it at least helps to fix some of the issues that exist today across, you know, nationwide for federal lands.
Well, that's good to know, because we try to record and take as many pictures as possible on our stewardship projects. So I would hate to somebody come back and say, oh, did you have a permit? I'm like, I'm cleaning up the trash.
Well, yeah. And I see you pull up the BLM, you know, so here's the thing that's really interesting about this. So if you compare this language to what is on the National Park Service website, it's very different language, but the underlying law and federal code is exactly the same.
See, the way they're saying filming for permits include recording on public lands that include the use of actors, models, sets, and or props. And the same thing with still photography. But if you are using short-term filming activities, permits not required unless it would cause appreciable damage or disturbance to the public lands, their resources or improvements, or is prohibited by closure of the lands to such activities.
Right. So when I talked, this is part of the 3 months of discussion I had with BLM. I asked them this. I mean, I brought them to this page and I said, here's what your website says. And I'm being told by some film offices that if I'm filming for YouTube or some social media, I need to get a permit. Like, you know, and this is like the confusion and just frustration of all this, is that it depends on who you ask. You know, and I asked them, I said, is your website language outdated? And again, it was kind of like, that's a question we don't really want to answer.
Yeah.
No.
For sure.
Adventures.
Because what that language to me sounded like when I first started talking to them was kind of what the National Park Service had back in 2021 after the Price v. Barr case. And, you know, that the judge in that case found that you know, there's a First Amendment issue, and as long as you weren't damaging resources, you had a right to go out there and film, right? And that was the ruling in that case. Now the Park Service appealed that case under Price v. Garland, and you know, that was when that ruling was reversed, and they found, you know, that judge particularly called out YouTube and social media and all those sorts of things. And you know, after that happened, National Park Service and Fish and Wildlife updated their guidance on their website to reflect that, but BLM seemed to more have the language that was more in line with the first ruling. So that's why I asked them, I was like, well, did you just not update your website? Because I see these other agencies that are also under the Department of Interior, and that ruling did update their language. And again, it's, you know, that's part of the confusion, right? What is somebody supposed to do? You know, if you went to that website and you're filming for YouTube, you would say, hey, I probably don't need a permit, it looks like. But then if you call different field offices, you may be told something completely different.
Yeah.
True. Very true.
Can I just ask, out of all of us who are creating content and shooting and everything, has anyone ever been caught, fined, threatened with a fine or a ticket or anything like that?
Not for
photography.
Not for photo or filming, just for like unintentional trespassing.
Like, yeah.
So
there was a really popular account that has since sort of gone by the wayside, and Jonathan and I used to be big fans of it for a while, but it sort of got way out of control, and it was Our Public Lands Hate You was the name of the Instagram account, and a while it was really great in that, like, it brought to light back in 2020 all of these new public land users who were doing really egregious things on public lands and like damaging resources and all this other stuff. But of course, the nature of social media, they were, and I'm still like sketchy on what the whole doxed thing is, but apparently they were like doxed beyond belief. And it got to the point where like people were getting death threats and harassed in their homes. And it was so bad because they parked on some flowers, you know what I mean? And like, we all make mistakes. And I think that's something that we can all agree on. Like, I'm sure every single person on this call can say that they've made a mistake in the past and they've done something wrong in the past. But the difference is, like, if you're sorry for it and you realize what you did wrong and you try to make changes in the future and all of those things, like there's something to be said for that. Like, there's something to be said for like the little mistakes that people make, and they're not egregious and they're not intentional, and it's not dumping a mattress somewhere on public land. It's like, I accidentally sat on a flower that maybe I shouldn't have, you know what I mean? But like,
it was protected. Yes.
Yeah. And this account was like, that was how to Adventures of Salt and Sweet Tea, when they said who's enforcing the rules, and you just caught by being reported. Like, the bigger your account is, the more likely you are going to get blasted.
Oh yeah,
social media somewhere.
Especially if you're doing drone footage, you know, with people will question you whether or not you have a license, you know, all that.
What that individual did with that account, what that individual did was, it was during the super bloom at Anza Borrega. And so you had all these influencers going out and laying in the flowers with a bottle of Dove or a bottle of, you know, this lotion, or here's the dress from Zulily or whatever. And he would be like, he would call out the influencer and be like, hey, here's this, but also Dove, this is a protected area. Is this how you want your influencers like dealing with the public lands? And so we tried to put it back onto the company, and to be fair, like a bunch of those companies responded and were like, hey, we don't support this. We don't know what they were thinking. We have severed ties with them, blah, blah, blah. But it turned out that that account got enough traction that, like Christina said, like people were, oh, this is Steve Smith at 123 Main Street. You should, and then it was like, oh, Steve also, he's sponsored by Dove, but he's also sponsored by Vicks razors. Let's get them off the razors. And now you're affecting Steve's whole lifestyle is gone because
his entire income has disappeared.
And that fooled into that mob mentality of like just out of control. And so, but that's what happens when you have no standard like fee nationwide or no standard set of rules that we all have to follow. Everybody's, oh no, go ahead. And then you go to the next park and they're like, hey, it's $10,000. Like, so
yeah, like
I think that's frustrating.
You can call Glen Canyon NRA and ask for a permit first and get laughed at. So
yeah.
We were actually in Arches National Park 2-3 years ago, and there was some Instagrammer, YouTuber scaling these huge arches just to get his picture. And it made us so livid because so that type of person, I absolutely think and hope they get caught and fined or whatever they do.
So I think the key thing and what they're trying to do in the legislation is, is what that person or influencer doing, was that acceptable behavior by any visitor to the park? Okay, then that shouldn't be allowed, right?
Exactly.
And that's what they're trying to kind of do with this legislation.
I also am the guy who, when I see the headline "Instagrammer falls off of arch and dies because he's a moron," I have no sympathy.
Survival of the fittest.
Cool.
Same.
I got that one.
Jonathan, to your question of is anybody actually getting in trouble for this? So here's what I can say about that. So probably the most well-known is Curr and Nate. You guys probably have all heard of them. They have a huge YouTube channel. They did actually get, I think they were just fined in their case.
Got banned too.
They may have gotten banned. Yep. Mr. Price, obviously, that was kind of what this whole court case has been about that caused, all this flip-flop in the guidance. One other thing I'll say as well is, in my kind of passion about this, I have reached out to a lot of YouTube accounts, a lot of overlanding YouTube accounts, a lot of just outdoor YouTube accounts, trying to get people kind of spun up to talk about this, if for nothing else, to try to put pressure on the committee to clean up this language I talked about with the involved, right? Not a lot of people seem to be willing to talk about it, which I kind of get. I'm not going to name any names of anybody, right? I kind of get it. Like somebody comes to you and they're like, hey, this legislation exists to kind of make it not illegal to film anymore. And, would you be willing to go on your channel and talk about this? And they're like, oh, so you want me to go out and say like, hey, I may possibly be illegally filming. But there's this great news. There's this legislation. So I understand that, right? But kind of through those discussions, there was one YouTube account that I talked to, and I'll keep that name to myself. But they shared with me that they did actually get in trouble for this, and I was very surprised to hear that because I had not heard of anybody else, personally getting in trouble for that. And they haven't talked about that publicly, and I don't think they plan to, as far as I know. But they're kind of in a weird place now about really what to do going forward. So, it's not common at all, Jonathan. I don't think this is really being enforced. The scary part for me is, or anybody who's kind of doing any of this filming is, if you step foot on some federal land and you film, I mean, do you have to lay in bed at night and wonder, like, what if you have some overly aggressive permit administrator who is like, you know what, I don't like that guy and I don't like that he filmed on my land, and we're going to.
They have bigger fish to fry, like people hitting golf balls into the Grand Canyon.
I think some of them do, but but all of these places have permitting office and permitting officials, and that's their job. Yeah. Right. So.
Oh yeah.
I will say, I'm just want to comment on this Always on Liberty comment that just came in about the drone operator, and I don't know. I mean, I only have experience with DJI drones, and I've always been under the impression that DJI is they're the gold standard. Like their software, their drones, like everything is amazing. And the drone rules are very clear. Like to operate a DJI, they kick you when I fly my drone, I have 3 different apps open. There's an air map which shows me all the areas that are off limits. There's the DJI app, which shows me exactly what my drone, and then there's another app that shows me exactly like where I am, what I'm doing, what areas I'm flying over, what's prohibited, what's not, and the rules for those areas.
Yep.
And so I would say, speaking to that comment, like if they put dumb and they argue, I mean, they're a moron who knows they're doing something wrong and they got caught. But I can't speak beyond that as far as drones, just because the rules I think with drones are very clear.
Yeah. I don't know a whole lot about the drone topic. It's just something I started looking into a few weeks ago. I'm thinking about maybe potentially writing about that topic too and trying to learn about it. But something that was interesting in the research I've been doing that came up already is that, you know what the 107, the part 107 is, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right. And people get that because there's restrictions around commercial filming. Well, what I hadn't realized is that part of the, what's the word I'm looking for? Justification for that, they are looking back at this same federal code that defines commercial on federal lands. And that's part of what goes into them saying you need your Part 107 to do any kind of commercial, because it's, they're looking back at the same code, which I found very interesting. And it's
so the Part 107 distinguishes, like, let's say I buy Christina a drone for Christmas. She can fly that drone. She can charge it up and fly it right now from our backyard.
Yep. She
can only fly to a certain, because of the guidelines, she would be recreational. So she can only fly 400 meters high, or I don't know if it's feet or meters, but she can't fly more than 2 miles away. She can't fly higher than this amount, and blah blah blah. And the Part
or fly at night, and that's
or fly at night. And the Part 107, it's almost you are a pilot. You are a UAV pilot, and you assume those responsibilities when you get that Part 107. You are a professional pilot. Doesn't matter if it's your first flight. Doesn't matter if it's your 1,000th flight. You have that part. You are a professional pilot.
Yep.
And you should act accordingly. And you then have to know the rules.
Yeah.
So,
and kind of going through this, Avis actually just got her Part 107 here recently. Because we're trying to do everything legal that we can do, and and just researching the topic. But it's Jonathan, one of the things that's been kind of baffling to me in this whole thing is, again, depending on who you talk to, if I go into some federal land, whether it's with a drone or with my iPhone or whatever it is, and I film, and I just film and I take that and I show it as a home movie to my family, that's no problem. It's absolutely okay. But if I take that exact same thing that I did and I post it on YouTube or Instagram, depending on who you talk to, that may be considered commercial, even though the act was exactly the same.
100%.
That's
it's the, like you said, the ambiguity between, what is the actual standard? Why can't they all have the same exact language? And the intent, like you said, if I'm intending to go out and film, to put this, I have a monetized channel. Let's say I have 300,000 subscribers. I'm already monetized. I'm going out there with a crew of people, not a film crew like a major thing,
right,
but just a group of people, and I'm filming to produce content for my YouTube channel. That's commercial. I'm making money doing it, But if I have a small little channel and I'm just going out and having some fun with my family, and I'm not making money on my channel, am I still technically commercial?
And again, it depends on who you talk to. I talked to someone in the National Forest Service. I had a 70-minute phone call with them on this topic, and because I was so just blown away by the discussion we were having, and that individual, their view of it was anything that you posted on social media, because they make ads and they make money. So they went as far as to say during that conversation, if you film and you post it on Facebook or Instagram, we don't care if you made money or not. We were well within our right to arrest you and march you down to the magistrate's office and charge you. Yeah. And I was just that's crazy, right?
Let's say you're a small timer and you film a backyard barbecue and you get a really beautiful shot of your kid running across the yard. There's a sprinkler and there's light behind him and there's the rainbow and it's gorgeous, and your kid is wearing a Nike shirt in front of a Weber grill.
Yeah.
You put it on Instagram and you're like, it'd be cool to get a free grill or maybe some Nike shoes out of this. You tag Nike and you tag Weber. Guess what? You're commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do what Tara said. Get your permits, get your license, your pilot's license, and follow the rules, and then you'll be safe. And get your liability insurance.
Yes, and I'm also an insurance agent, and it's cheaper than people may think, and coverage for everything.
Good. And talk to Alexandria for insurance.
We'll just throw
to hook you up.
Tara, yeah. I'm sure you know Tara as well, but like, I don't know who you go through, but Pickard is a great photo and video insurer where you can literally, like Tara said, you can email them, they'll drop the name in, email it back to you, boom, your policy's updated. Yeah. And it works. They work with something where it's like, let's say you email them Friday at 5 and they're not in the office and your shoot is Monday at 5 a.m. It counts.
Right.
So, yeah.
And that a lot of people, again, these things that distinguish, like Jonathan was saying earlier, where people say, I'm a photographer. And it's one of the first things I know that distinguishes, because if anybody's been doing this for even a few years, they know what PPA is. And that's the Professional Photographers of America Association. And they do all of that. They handhold you on all of that, whether it comes to copyright, insurance, all of that. The second you are a member, you have all of that at your fingertips on that website for them to basically do it for you. You just have to click a few buttons and pay it, and you're covered for pretty much anything. So there's kind of, in my mind, there's no excuse other than like there's kind of a lack of education for people going on with digital age of things. But it is very cheap. If they're already paying vehicle insurance, like there's so many ways to combine insurances on things that actually cover the issues that these parks and things are worried about. But there's an extreme lack of education. Even from the parks could explain this to people if they, as far as the necessity for that. I mean, you're required to have vehicle insurance. This isn't that much more complicated than that. So it's just a lack of information and education being put out there on it.
If you had to take a poll right now of all of the monetized YouTubers filming on public lands, how many do you think have the permits and have the insurance and all that, percentage wise?
Barely 5%.
It's single digits.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I could probably count on one hand.
I also think that is, I mean, because we all run in the same circles, right? We all know all of our circles overlap, all of our people in different companies and sponsorships overlap, and I think that helps. But I would say, like, people that are just going out there and doing it, I mean, if they're in these circles, yeah, they know. But if they're just out there monetizing their own YouTube channel and they bought a Ford Transit 2 years ago and they live in a van, like, yeah, 0% on those people. So.
Yeah.
I think a lot, they just don't even know. Again, I won't name any names, but one of the first people when I was first learning about this topic and I reached out to, and I was more at that point, I was more in kind of an inquisitive, like trying to learn, like I'm, about this. And I reached out to a fairly popular YouTuber and I said, hey, I'm just learning about this. And did you know about this? And, they came back and told me that, no, that was all completely wrong. And they had actually talked about this with a bunch of other YouTubers and, they decided that this whole permitting thing didn't actually exist. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting because that's not what I'm seeing. Can you kind of point me to, what you're seeing that's leading you to believe that? And, kind of through some back and forth, they ended up pointing me to something that was like not at all relevant from like the 90s. And, well,
if another YouTuber said it, has to be true. I mean,
right. So in the end, I think they were like, oh yeah, that's not actually the case. Like, yeah, you're right. It is,
Yeah.
So,
well, interesting topics tonight, guys. Thank you so much for all of your input. And I'll leave you with one question for consideration. What about overlanders that travel internationally? Do they need to get permits for the different government lands they're on in different countries?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yes.
I would assume so. So very great topic. Very, very, very happy that you guys joined us and gave us some wisdom on this stuff. And, guys, just protect yourself out there if you're doing your thing for monetization. Yeah. That's all we want to make sure that you're doing.
CYA.
Yeah. And then if you don't mind me saying, just, anybody who's listening to this, please go out and read, the bill, the legislation that's being proposed in Congress for this. Understand it. Reach out to the committee. Let them know what you think about it, and encourage them to clean up the language, but also, hopefully pass the bill. I mean, this bill, it never got a vote in committee last year. So there's no guarantee that's going to happen this year. I mean, we could still be talking about this same issue. It'd be nice to at least make this issue better. And that can happen if this Aurora gets pushed out for a vote and passed.
There's a ton of different legislation going on. And like we talked about earlier, land closures and reorganizations of the boundaries and all kinds of things. So just pay attention.
Just to circle back around one more time, since the beginning of the call, I did sneak onto my phone and look it up to check to make sure there were no other updates, but the public comment portion of the hearings has closed for Sand Hollow, Sand Mountain, and the St. George area. So it closed about 7 days ago last week, and we're just in a waiting pattern now to see what happens with that land down there. But that's not the only place around the country that this is happening. We're seeing it happen in Moab, Utah. We're seeing it happen in all sorts of places all over the West. So I guess I would encourage people to stay on top of those stories and fight for your access to your public lands.
And I will leave with one piece of good news. In the Ouachita National Forest, the current legislation is going through about opening up additional overnight campsites there. So that's some good news. Yeah. They're expanding some things. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.